January 22, 1943, Point Cruz, Guadalcanal. The coconut grove is silent except for the sound of men dying. Second Lieutenant John George crouches in the shattered ruins west of Point Cruz, counting bodies. 14 American soldiers from the 122nd Infantry Regiment lie dead in the mud. 72 hours. 14 men. The Japanese snipers are invisible. They fire once, kill once, and vanish into the jungle canopy like ghosts. George's battalion commander is losing his mind. Every patrol that enters the Point Cruz groves takes casualties. Every medic who runs to help becomes target number 2. The snipers are tearing apart his unit from the inside. Intelligence estimates 11 Japanese marksmen operating in the sector. 11 men have paralyzed an entire American battalion. The worst part, nobody can find them. They're using a tactic that's brutally effective. They tie themselves into the tops of coconut palms 40 feet above the jungle floor, sacrificing mobility and any chance of escape for perfect concealment. They have enough water and rice to last a week. They're willing to die up there if it means taking 20 Americans with them. The battalion's issued sniper rifles, clunky M13A4 Springfields with Weaver scopes, have accomplished nothing. The scopes fog in humidity. The bolt action is too slow for multiple moving targets, and the O3A4s lack the precision needed for counter-sniper work in jungle conditions, where you have one shot before the enemy disappears. George watches another squad refuse to enter the groves. He doesn't blame them. Walking into those trees is suicide. What the battalion commander doesn't know is that John George has brought something forbidden to this island, something that violates every Army regulation about unauthorized civilian weapons in a combat zone, something his commanding officers ordered him to leave behind in the States: a hunting rifle, a goddamn mail-order Winchester Model 70 target rifle, chambered in .30-06 Springfield, topped with a Lyman Alaskan 2.5x scope that George paid $30 for through a Sears catalog. The officers called it a toy, a bastard rifle, a liability. But George was the youngest shooter to ever win the Illinois State Championship at 1,000 yards. He knows rifles, he knows marksmanship, and he knows that the Springfield 03A4 isn't the weapon for this job. What the Japanese snipers in those trees don't know is that they're about to face the most devastating 4 days of counter-sniper warfare in the Pacific Theater. The Japanese sniper problem on Guadalcanal isn't new. It's been killing Americans since the Marines landed in August 1942. By January 1943, the Japanese have perfected a nightmare doctrine. Their snipers aren't reconnaissance scouts or targets of opportunity. They're trained executioners operating behind a calculated philosophy: psychological warfare through invisible death. Every Japanese sniper manual emphasizes the same principle: tie yourself to a tree, pick one target, kill him, then wait 6 hours before firing again. Make the Americans terrified of every shadow, and it's working. American units throughout Guadalcanal report the same pattern: a crack from nowhere, a man falls, and then nothing. No muzzle flash, no second shot, just silence. Medics who respond get shot. Officers who investigate die next. Japanese snipers have turned the jungle into a hunting ground where the predators are invisible. The U.S. Army's solution has been inadequate. They issue M1903A4 Springfield rifles, bolt-action rifles with Weaver 330C scopes. On paper, they're sniper rifles. In reality, they're plagued with problems. The scopes fog instantly in jungle humidity. The eye relief is too short, forcing shooters to press their faces against the scope and absorb brutal recoil. The Weaver glass is hunting grade, fine for deer, inadequate for identifying camouflaged humans in dense foliage at 300 yards. Worse, the doctrine is wrong. The Army trains its designated marksmen to wait for clean shots, conserve ammunition, and avoid engaging multiple targets. That works in European open terrain. In the jungle, it's a death sentence. Japanese snipers work in teams, covering each other's positions. Kill one and his partner kills you 3 seconds later from a different tree. The expert consensus is unanimous. Sniping in jungle warfare is nearly impossible. General Alexander Patch, commanding 14th Corps on Guadalcanal, receives reports that recommend avoiding sniper duels entirely. Just call in artillery, burn the groves with flamethrowers, bypass the snipers and let them starve. But that costs time and territory. And in January 1943, the Americans need to push west toward Point Cruz to secure the island. There's no bypassing the snipers. Someone has to go into those groves and eliminate them. The 132nd Infantry Regiment tries everything. They send squads with automatic weapons to spray the treetops. Waste of ammunition. They can't see the targets. They assign their best riflemen with M1 Garands to provide suppressive fire. Useless, the Garand's semi-automatic mechanism lacks the precision for long-range counter-sniper work, and its 8-round clip creates that distinctive ping when empty, telegraphing when you're vulnerable. They even try the Springfield Arrow 3A4 sniper rifles issued by the Army. The designated marksmen venture into the groves, scanning the canopy. They find nothing. The Japanese snipers are too well concealed. By the time an American spots muzzle flash, it's too late. The 03A4's slow bolt action means you can't engage multiple targets rapidly. Japanese snipers exploit this weakness ruthlessly. The stakes are brutal. Every day, the 132nd can't advance past Point Cruz. Japanese forces dig in deeper. The American divisions push to secure western Guadalcanal stalls. Allied command watches nervously. If American infantry can't neutralize 11 Japanese snipers, how will they island hop across the Pacific against fortified positions? The failure isn't just tactical, it's existential. The entire American doctrine of jungle warfare is being dissected by enemy snipers who have mastered terrain that Americans barely understand. By January 20th, 1943, battalion commanders are desperate. They need someone, anyone, who can go into the Point Cruz groves and solve the sniper problem. Not with firepower, not with radios calling in artillery, with marksmanship. That's when a quiet, young second lieutenant from Illinois approaches his company commander. His name is John George. He's 24 years old. He has 0 confirmed kills in combat, and he's carrying a rifle the Army never authorized him to bring. John Bower George should not be on Guadalcanal. He's not a career soldier. He's not from a military family. He's a kid from rural Illinois who fell in love with target shooting because his hands were too small for football. Born May 1st, 1918 in Princeton, Missouri, George grew up obsessed with rifle marksmanship in the way some kids obsess over baseball. By 1939, at age 21, he became the youngest shooter in Illinois history to win the state championship at 1,000 yards. Think about that. 1,000 yards, 11 football fields. With iron sights and Kentucky windage, George could put rounds on target at distances where most men can't even see what they're shooting at. In 1940, he enlisted as a private in the Illinois National Guard, training with the 33rd Infantry Division. His fellow guardsmen quickly realized George wasn't normal. While they qualified with their rifles, George won competitions. While they griped about cleaning their Springfields, George studied ballistics manuals like Scripture. The man could tell you the minute of angle deviation on a .30-06 round at 600 yards in crosswind conditions without looking it up. When the Illinois National Guard was federalized after Pearl Harbor, George's unit became part of the American Division, the only U.S. division in World War II named after its geographic formation rather than a number, Icken. New Caledonia. They deployed to the Pacific in early 1942. George was commissioned as a second lieutenant with the 132nd Infantry Regiment. But here's where George made the decision that would define his war. He refused to leave his competition rifles behind. Before shipping out, George packed his Winchester Model 70 target rifle, a civilian bolt-action 30-6 with a Lyman Alaskan 2.5x scope. His superior officers told him to leave it. Civilian weapons are unauthorized in combat zones. Ammunition supply chains can't support non-standard firearms. If the weapon malfunctions, the Army won't replace it. George smuggled it into his footlocker anyway. When the 132nd landed on Guadalcanal in November 1942, George's rifle became legendary for the wrong reasons. His fellow officers mocked it. They called it a mail-order toy, a bastard rifle, a fence post because of its long target barrel. Some questioned his judgment. Who brings a deer rifle to war? But George saw something others didn't. The issued M1903 ORs were adequate for basic sniping. His Winchester was built for precision. It had a free-floating barrel for consistent accuracy. The Lyman Alaskan scope had been designed for harsh conditions, rugged, reliable, and clear at distance. Most importantly, the Winchester's smooth bolt action allowed rapid follow-up shots. In competition, George had trained to engage multiple targets in seconds. And in January 1943, as Japanese snipers turned the Point Cruz groves into a graveyard, George had a moment of insight. The Army was treating sniper warfare as a chess match. One shot, one kill, patience. The Japanese were playing it like an ambush. Multiple shooters, coordinated positions, psychological terror. George realized he needed to play it like a competition shoot. Fast, aggressive, overwhelming firepower delivered with surgical precision. On January 20, 1943, George walked into his battalion commander's tent and volunteered for the impossible mission. He was holding his bastard rifle. The battalion commander stares at George's Winchester like it's a piece of evidence at a court-martial. "That's a civilian hunting rifle," the major says. "Yes, sir." "You brought an unauthorized firearm into a combat zone." "Yes, sir." "That is illegal, Lieutenant." George doesn't flinch. "Sir, the Aero 3A4s can't get the job done. I've been watching our marksmen for 3 months. The issued rifles aren't built for rapid target transitions, and those Weaver scopes fog in this humidity. I need to try something different." The battalion operations officer jumps in. "You want to walk into a kill zone where 14 of our men have died, armed with a glorified deer rifle? That's insane." George pulls out a worn notebook, his shooting log from the Illinois State Championships. He flips to a page showing his scores. Consecutive hits at 1,000 yards, multiple target transitions under time pressure, wind calculations that read like physics equations. "Sir, I was the youngest shooter to ever win Illinois State at distance. This rifle has been zeroed to my eye since 1939. I know its ballistics better than I know my own heartbeat. The Winchester's free-floating barrel gives me better accuracy than any military rifle in this division, and the Lyman Alaskan scope won't fog. It's built for Alaska hunting conditions worse than this jungle." The major looks at his operations officer. Neither speaks. 14 dead Americans in 3 days. The entire Point Cruz offensive stalled. High command breathing down their necks. What do they have to lose? "Fine," the major finally says. "You get 1 patrol. If you can't produce results, you hand over that bastard rifle and I'm writing you up for unauthorized equipment." January 22, 1943, 0917 hours. George and a hand-picked spotter, Private First Class Robert Henderson from Iowa, enter the Point Cruz coconut groves. The heat is suffocating. Humidity turns the air into soup. George moves slowly, scanning the canopy through his Lyman scope. The key is patience. Japanese snipers rely on American impatience. They wait for you to rush, expose yourself, make noise. George does the opposite. He finds concealment in a collapsed bunker, piles coral rubble around his position, and settles in. Henderson watches with binoculars, scanning tree trunks for anomalies, anything that doesn't belong. 30 minutes pass. Nothing. Then Henderson freezes. Contact, 11 o'clock, 40 feet up, palm tree near the rusted fuel drum. George swings his Winchester. At first, he sees nothing. Then, there, a shape that's too straight against the curved palm trunk, camouflage netting expertly woven, and beneath it, barely visible, the glint of a rifle scope. The Japanese sniper is watching an American patrol moving south through the clearing. He's lining up his shot. George settles his crosshairs on the barely visible shape. The Winchester's trigger breaks clean, one of the smoothest triggers ever put on a production rifle. The recoil is negligible. Through the scope, George watches the camouflaged shape jerk backward, then slump forward against the rope tying him to the tree. The Japanese rifle falls 40 feet and crashes into the undergrowth. First kill confirmed. Henderson whispers, "Holy shit." George cycles the bolt and keeps scanning. That was the easy one. Now his friends know we're here. By noon, George has killed 5 Japanese snipers. Word spreads through the 132nd like wildfire. Men who mocked his mail-order toy rifle are now asking if they can watch him work. Battalion staff officers who threatened to confiscate his Winchester suddenly want detailed reports on his technique. The same major who called George's plan insane 3 hours ago is now radioed by regiment command wanting to know what the hell is happening at Point Cruz. But not everyone is celebrating. January 23, 1943, 800 hours. George is summoned to a command tent behind the lines. He walks in to find a hostile audience, his battalion commander, the regimental weapons officer, a captain from Division Ordnance, and a Marine Corps liaison major who looks like he's about to explode. The Marine major speaks first. "Lieutenant, I've been informed you're using an unauthorized civilian rifle in active combat operations. Is this true?" "Yes, sir." "Do you understand that violates U.S. Army regulations on standardized equipment?" "I do, sir." The Division Ordnance captain leans forward. "What happens when that rifle breaks? We don't have spare parts for Winchester Model 70s. You think the supply chain is going to airdrop you a new firing pin." George keeps his voice level. "Sir, I've been shooting this rifle for 4 years. I know how to maintain it. The trigger assembly is simpler than an 003A4, and the 30-006 ammunition is the same round we're already using." "That's not the point." The Marine major is heating up. "The point is discipline. The point is order. If every lieutenant decides to bring his personal deer rifle to the Pacific, we lose standardization, we lose interoperability, we lose control." The regimental weapons officer, a crusty lieutenant colonel named Briggs, cuts in. "Let me ask you something, Lieutenant. How many confirmed kills did you have yesterday?" "5 confirmed, sir. Henderson spotted 2 more probables that we couldn't verify." "And how many rounds did you fire?" 12, sir. 4 misses due to wind and 1 malfunction. Henderson bumped my barrel during target transition." The room goes quiet. Briggs does the math in his head. 12 rounds, 5 confirmed kills in 1 day. Our battalion's designated marksmen have fired over 200 rounds in the past 2 weeks with 0 confirmed kills. The Marine major isn't backing down. "That's irrelevant. This sets a dangerous precedent. What's next? Soldiers bringing their personal sidearms, their hunting shotguns. This is the United States Army, not a shooting club." And that's when the room erupts. The battalion commander slams his hand on the table. 14 of my men are dead. 14. I've got sergeants refusing to send patrols into those groves because they know it's suicide. And you're worried about standardization? The ordnance captain fires back. I'm worried about maintaining supply chains in a theater where we can barely get C rations to the front. The Marine major stands. I'm worried about what happens when every cowboy officer decides regulations don't apply to him. Then worry about the men dying while you argue about regulations. The battalion commander's face is red. George killed 5 snipers yesterday. 5 in one day, with a rifle you call unauthorized. You know what's really unauthorized. Letting our men get slaughtered because we're too proud to let someone use a tool that actually works. The tent falls silent. Briggs, the regimental weapons officer, speaks quietly. How many more Japanese snipers are in those groves, Lieutenant? George answers immediately. Intelligence estimated 11. I confirmed 5 kills. That leaves 6, maybe 7 if there are more we didn't detect. How long to clear them? Give me 2 more days, sir. 3 at most. Briggs looks at the Marine major, then at the ordnance captain. He makes a decision. Gentlemen, I don't care if Lieutenant George is shooting a flintlock musket. If he can clear Point Cruz in 3 days, he can use whatever rifle he wants. After that, we'll discuss regulations. But right now, we've got an offensive that's dead in the water, and this man has found a solution. He turns to George. You've got 72 hours, Lieutenant. Clear those groves. Don't get killed. And for God's sake, don't let that rifle break. George salutes. Yes, sir. If you're finding this story incredible, please hit subscribe. We uncover forgotten true stories like this every week that changed history. January 23rd, 1943, 14:30 hours. The Point Cruz Groves. George is back in position with Henderson. His Winchester is hot from the morning session. 3 more confirmed kills, bringing his total to 8 Japanese snipers eliminated in 36 hours. But the remaining 3 are the most dangerous. They've seen their comrades fall. They know an American counter-sniper is hunting them, and they've adjusted their tactics. The afternoon is dead silent. No birds, no insects. Just heat and the smell of rotting coconuts. Henderson whispers, "They've gone dark. Could be they've pulled back." George shakes his head. "They're here. They're just waiting for us to make a mistake." And then it happens. A shot cracks from the northeast tree line. 200 yards away, an American patrol scout drops, clutching his shoulder. The medic rushes forward. George sees it instantly. It's a trap. The first shot was intentional. Wound, not kill. Draw in the medic. The real target is the rescuer. Through his scope, George scans the canopy northeast. Henderson's binoculars sweep the same sector. I don't see him. He's invisible. George slows his breathing. Years of competition shooting kick in. He's not looking for a man. He's looking for errors. A shadow that's too symmetrical. A branch that doesn't move in the breeze. A texture that's too uniform. There, 60 feet up in a coconut palm, a cluster of fronds that haven't moved in 15 minutes while every other tree sways in the wind. It's camouflage netting, weighted down. George puts his crosshairs on the center mass of the suspicious shape and applies pressure to the Winchester's trigger. The rifle bucks. Through the scope, he watches a Japanese sniper lurch forward against his rope harness, then hang limp. Henderson exhales. Jesus, I never even saw him. But George is already swinging left. If that sniper had a partner providing overwatch, he's about to muzzle flash. A bullet cracks past George's head, missing by inches. The shot came from a palm tree 80 yards south, a completely different sector. George doesn't panic. This is what competition shooting taught him. Rapid target transitions under pressure. He finds the second sniper's position, another cluster of camouflage netting, and fires. The Winchester's bolt cycles smoothly. Second round. The netting erupts in movement. The Japanese sniper falls, his body swinging grotesquely from the rope still tied around his waist. 2 kills, 8 seconds apart. The battlefield goes silent again. Henderson is shaking. They almost got you. George ejects his spent brass and chambers a fresh round. 1 left, maybe 2. But the remaining Japanese snipers have had enough. Intelligence reports later confirm what George suspected. The last sniper abandoned his position that night and retreated west toward Japanese-held territory. He never made it. A Marine patrol found his body 3 days later, dead from infected wounds. By January 25, 1943, the Point Cruz groves are cleared. The Japanese sniper team that paralyzed an entire battalion is eliminated. The kill ratio is staggering. John George fired 42 rounds over 4 days. He scored 11 confirmed kills. That's a 26% hit rate in jungle conditions against concealed elevated targets at ranges between 150 and 350 yards. For comparison, the average military sniper engagement in World War II had a hit rate around 10–15%. More importantly, 0 American casualties during George's counter-sniper operations. The 14 men killed before George's mission were the last. After he cleared the groves, the 132nd Infantry Regiment advanced through Point Cruz without losing a single soldier to sniper fire. The operational impact is immediate. With Point Cruz secured, the American Division pushes west, compressing Japanese forces into an ever-shrinking perimeter. By February 9, 1943, organized Japanese resistance on Guadalcanal ends. The island is declared secure, but George's impact goes beyond one island. Word of his Winchester Model 70 spreads through the Pacific Theater like legend. Marine Corps snipers begin requesting civilian hunting rifles, specifically Winchester Model 70s with target barrels and commercial scopes. The U.S. Marine Corps Marksmanship Training Unit studies George's techniques. In 1943, they officially recommend the Winchester Model 70 as a sniper platform paired with an 8x inertial scope. By the Vietnam War, the Winchester Model 70 becomes the primary sniper rifle of Marine Scout sniper teams. The legendary Carlos Hathcock, 93 confirmed kills, uses a Winchester Model 70 with an 8x inertial scope throughout his Vietnam deployment. When Hathcock is asked why he prefers the Winchester over military-issue rifles, he gives a simple answer: accuracy and reliability. It works. The legacy traces directly back to John George and his bastard rifle on Guadalcanal. But there's a human cost to precision killing that the statistics don't capture. George later writes in his memoir, Shots Fired in Anger, about the psychological weight of counter-sniper work. He describes the strange intimacy of killing a man through a scope, seeing his face, his hands, his final movements. He writes about nightmares where he's the one tied to the tree, waiting for a bullet that never comes. After Guadalcanal, George volunteers for Merrill's Marauders, the legendary long-range penetration unit operating in Burma. He brings his Winchester during the brutal 700-mile march through Japanese-held territory. In 1944, George adds 7 more confirmed sniper kills. The rifle that officers tried to confiscate becomes one of the most effective sniper weapons in the China-Burma-India theater. One of George's fellow marauders, Lieutenant Thomas Davis, later recalls, George moved through the jungle like he was hunting deer back home. Calm, patient. That Winchester was part of his body. The Japanese learned to fear that rifle. They'd find their snipers dead in trees with single shots through the chest. Clean, precise, terrifying. By the time George returned stateside in late 1944, his Winchester has fired over 200 rounds in combat. He's credited with 18 confirmed kills, but more importantly, the thousands of American soldiers who advanced through Point Cruz and the hills of Burma never knew they were alive because a kid from Illinois refused to leave his deer rifle at home. The full story of John George's war is in his memoir, Shots Fired in Anger. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We're bringing you forgotten heroes every week. After the war, John Bower George does what most combat veterans do. He tries to disappear. He returns to Illinois in 1945, earns a degree, and eventually retires as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. He never seeks fame. He never appears on talk shows or war documentaries. When fellow veterans ask about Guadalcanal, he changes the subject. But in 1947, George does something unusual for a man who values privacy. He writes Shots Fired in Anger, a technical memoir analyzing infantry weapons and tactics in the Pacific. The book becomes legendary among military historians and firearms enthusiasts. George's writing is blunt, detailed, and unsentimental. He critiques the M1903A4 sniper rifle. He praises the M1 Garand for infantry work, but notes its limitations for precision shooting. And he provides a detailed technical analysis of why the Winchester Model 70 outperformed military rifles in jungle conditions. The book influences an entire generation of American military marksmanship training. By the 1960s, Shots Fired in Anger is required reading at Marine Corps sniper schools. Carlos Hathcock reads it before deploying to Vietnam. Modern special operations snipers study George's chapters on stalking and range estimation, but George himself remains humble. When asked about his 11 kills on Guadalcanal, he gives a typically understated response. "I did what needed to be done. Other men did harder things." The production numbers tell the real story. During World War II, the U.S. military formally adopted the Winchester Model 70 as a sniper platform, ordering thousands of rifles for Marine Corps Scout sniper units. In Korea, Marine snipers continue using Model 70s. In Vietnam, the Winchester Model 70 is still frontline equipment until the M40 Remington gradually replaces it in the late 1960s. The rifle George carried, serial number unknown, lost to history, may still exist in some veteran's safe or museum collection, or it may have been destroyed in Burma, worn out from 2 years of combat. George never said. He sold or gave away most of his wartime equipment after returning home. The moral lesson isn't about the rifle. It's about a young lieutenant who looked at a failing doctrine and said, "There's a better way." The U.S. Army in 1943 had a culture that valued standardization over innovation, regulations over results. George broke those rules, not recklessly, but intelligently. He knew his capabilities, he knew his weapon, and he trusted his judgment over the bureaucracy. The 14 men who died before George arrived never got to see Point Cruz secured, but the thousands who survived the advance, who walked through those coconut groves without taking sniper fire, owe their lives to a man they never met, carrying a rifle the Army called illegal. John Bower George died on January 3, 2009, in Aiken, South Carolina. He was 90 years old. His obituary mentions his military service in one sentence. No headlines, no national news coverage, just a quiet exit for a man who changed modern sniper warfare. But in the jungles of Guadalcanal, in the mountains of Burma, and in every Marine sniper hide from Vietnam to Iraq, John George's legacy endures, because sometimes the bastard rifle isn't the weapon. Sometimes it's the man who refuses to follow the rules that don't make sense. John George's memoir, Shots Fired in Anger, is still in print today. Subscribe for more forgotten heroes who changed history.